had you decided to actually be a strength and conditioning coach, if it wasn't as intense right away, like, do you think that skill set of the ATC plus being a strength coach could have been like that perfection, especially now? Because I mean, we're talking, that was back in 2015, right? Like 8 years, like you were ahead of the time.
Yeah, just a lazy trendsetter. I only got both because it was like two different courses at Co, and I didn't know what to decide. My roommate wanted to be an athletic trainer, and so I didn't know what that was, and I signed up to be one when I was like a freshman, and you had to like apply immediately. And I went into the interview, and they sat me down, and they were like, why do you want to be an athletic trainer? And I had no idea what an athletic trainer was.
Because he does.
Because California doesn't actually have a law at that time. You need an athletic trainer. So in high school, we never had one. Only state that didn't require it at the time. And so I go in there, and I start talking about like weightlifting. And they're like, that's not what this is. And then I pulled out my ass. I was like, yeah, but I need to be a Swiss Army knife in this position because I'll be handling across. And they were like, oh, yes. I was like, oh, I saved that by just a hair. Because they were like, why did you learn about us through like men's fitness or strength conditioning journals? And I was like, oh, because it requires to have a diverse background. So I got into the program, and I enjoyed the schooling because it was very different in the approach of strength conditioning. You learn anatomy much more detail. You learn mechanisms of injury and all this stuff. Do I think it helped me? It made me more arrogant because I thought I knew something others didn't. When it wasn't like I did know something others didn't, but others knew a lot more than me that I didn't as well. And so it made me get humbled really quick. And that was the biggest thing I left that internship was I remember being very embarrassed. And I was like really ashamed of myself when it ended because I felt like I knew so little. And I was a guy with 2 degrees. I had an ATC. I was going to be a master's at Iowa State. And I was really ashamed of myself. And I thought like, wow, like, I don't know. I kind of was never really a smart kid in school. And I felt really dumb at the end of all that. And that you guys knew all this stuff. And I promised myself it wasn't going to be reading that held me back. Because there's so much verbiage and words used. I didn't understand what they meant. And it just, I had this whole pedigree, schooling of athletic training. And I was like, well, I should know all this stuff, but I don't know any of it. And so I felt really dumb. And that was the biggest thing I remember leaving there was I was just so embarrassed of myself. And I was like embarrassed to like run into you guys because I just felt like I was so dumb. But Brian Dermody had a file that he gave everyone of all the books and all the resources and articles, and you could like download that and like go over at the end of your internship. It was like some books or stuff that you guys have had for the courses, and I read every single file in that twice.
Holy shit!
And I just for like 3 years I just read it because I was just so embarrassed. And then I realized like that was really cool and really helpful. But that's the schooling I wish I had when I was in school because it was heavy science based, and then it wasn't really in this competitive environment like an internship can be when guys are weird and they're like kind of trying to set you up for failure. Not you guys, but like other interns are like sabotaging you, and you're like,
they said to set it up over there, and you're like, yeah, fuck yeah.
Yeah, they would do that. It was like, what is this? Let me some like the kumbayas of athletic trainers. Like, you need help taping someone? I'll come over and help you out. Here it's like, yes, the hurdle's supposed to be set up with the leg that way. And they're like,
oh, yeah, and you know that you'd get the fucking heat brought on you if it wasn't.
Yeah, so that's kind of how that went. And then but the background helped with a lot of stuff, understanding a variety of things because you got exposed to stuff. And it helps me in my current position than what I do now quite a bit more than I did at the time, I guess, previously. Just the knowledge background, per se, not necessarily, I'm not a practicing athletic trainer. But having the knowledge to communicate across domains is very helpful.
You mentioned the Iowa State thing, and I remember that you were going there, and then out of nowhere, DeMarco was like, "Hey, did you know? Like, look at what he's doing. Like, how did you know back in 15 or 16 to start doing what you were doing and start putting out content for free? Because I mean, you were again way ahead of the game."
I did it when I pooped. Like, it's that simple. Like, hey, people are like, what's the plan? Like, I don't know. I pooped every day, and then, like, I posted on social media. And, like, that was, like, the extent. People, like, think there's, like, some grandiose plan of, like, oh, how'd you get content out? I don't know. Like, I filmed stuff, and what had happened to Iowa State in a grad program, you kind of show up. And my professor, I was, like, his last master student. Like, he forgot that I was his student. And so I'm, like, a year and a half in, and, like, there's, like, zero guidance. And all I've done is I went like into the catacombs, and I was like, so like, is this how it works? Like, I guess I gotta learn everything on my own. I was so afraid again. And they had a whole section of like old, really good research, like foreign research, all the Olympic med books, all the Pavo Comis, all the just like in this dusty old cavern. And I was a grad student, and I checked out every single one. I had like 45 books. I had an unlimited checkout. And I'm in Iowa State. My now wife is at Iowa, and I live with my cousins, and I have like one class a day, and I don't know anyone. So I played Halo and read books all day. And then I was reading the books, and I'm like, this stuff is so cool. I didn't know there was a science to training. I only ever read, like Elite FTS, which is great, and they do great information, but they're not telling you about specific silence periods and neuromuscular firing patterns and how like these guys train this way, and these are the granular aspects of science that is exciting, and they're kind of like puzzle pieces, because at the end of the day, we talk about macro stuff, like, oh, what's the program, what's the squat, what's the that, and you can kind of get away with it, but we don't ever talk about like the building blocks. And I always kind of felt like when you read the building blocks, if you ever I just watched the Lego Movie the other day, randomly, by the way, kind of a funny movie, it's okay, not very good. But there's like a master builder is the idea of it. He can build the Legos. And I was like, oh, this is kind of like, you get the Lego pieces now. Instead of just like following the put together pieces, like, oh, I'm going to build the castle or the X-Wing because it tells me to put X, Y, and Z here. It's like, oh, I know that this 3-piece goes with this little 4-piece, and I can make my own thing. And when you learn the building blocks of it. And so I read a ton, and it really helped. And I was really embarrassed because I like didn't train anyone because I was in grad school. And I was like, well, no one's going to listen to me, so I just did it under Strong by Science. I thought it was a cool name. And I was like, I'm not going to put my name on it because who's going to listen to me? Like, I wouldn't listen to me. And so I was like, I'll just let the knowledge do the speaking, and then if they like it, they like it. And that's kind of what happened.
No, that's awesome. And then you started, from what I remember, you got hooked up with the G Flight, and then you, like you said, we were talking before, you went out to Colorado. Like, how did it all keep evolving for you? Like, did you chase it, or did opportunities come to you?
No, I like this stuff, and I like to tinker with things, and I like to learn. And then there's certain things that come up that, whether it was the opportunity in front of you, or someone came to you, or however it might be, and you might be able to provide value to an extent, and at a certain point in time, you might no longer be able to provide value, and there's another option you might be able to provide value. It's kind of just being open. I think we like to get so, especially in strength conditioning, and I speak about this as a guy who's not like in the college setting, so I hate to step on anyone's toes, but we don't make anything that's tangible. We don't. It's not like, oh, this is objectively a better pizza than someone else's. And the thought experiment I had recently was how long would it take from like the perfect program ever made? Let's say we have a group of 20 athletes, right, or 40, and then two groups of 20 exactly the same.
Yeah.
If we had the most perfect program ever, and we gave it to these 20 athletes, and then we had the 20 athletes just pick random exercises and do them, how long will it take for the layperson to recognize a difference in the programming? And I was like, man, like, it might be a very long time. Like, it really might. Like, how can not us, the strength coach, like, oh, this guy, whatever, but like, how can the layperson see the changes on the field differently? And when you start to think about that, it makes us really question, like, we don't make things that are acutely tangible. It takes time, and humans have a lot of trouble with time. We don't think in terms of years. We're not good at aggregated statistics. We never were evolved to deal with large quantities of numbers. You think about your sampling rate in evolutionary times, you probably only came in contact with 100 people like in a year, and now you have 10,000 people tweet you in a day. And so, like, the amount of information and our sampling of time is so different. And so what I'm trying to say is, when we build a program, it's hard to say immediately whether or not that's a good program or not. And so we fight for it. And we combat people like, oh, no, this is right, or that's right. And it's us like fighting our peers, and the athletes like, hey guys, like, I'm over here. It's kind of like, well, what happens if I even convince you my program's right? First off, regardless of where the cards fall, it's either right or wrong. I can convince you it's right, but it could still be wrong. So who cares if you think my program's right? Secondly, if I win the argument, do I
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.